Hey students, happy Thursday. Today is our last remote learning lesson. Tomorrow we have a celebration planned. I'll talk about that in a little bit. So far in our writing process, we've done some generating and collecting ideas for our informational writing piece. We've done some drafting. That's what you started on Tuesday and Wednesday. Today we're going to take a look at revising, and then you'll do the editing and publishing on your own. You're experienced enough with that. We'll talk about it just a bit, but you'll do your editing and publishing on your own. I'll show you what Mrs. Ash did for her editing and publishing. And then your writing pieces, your final 8th grade assignment is due tomorrow, Friday. So let's take a look at the revision process and our lesson for today. So you're going to watch the video lesson first. You might need to continue to do some research. As Mrs. Ash revised her writing piece, I needed to do some additional research, and I'll show you what that looked like as well. For writing, you're going to make your revisions today. You should have your rough drafts already completed, whether they are in your notebooks or in your done digitally on a Google Doc. You should have your drafts that you are going to work on revising today. So making revisions, what you're going to ask yourself is, in your writing piece, what really matters? What are you trying to say about this subject? What really matters? And then you're going to go and make some revisions. So let me show you what that looks like in Mrs. Ash's writing piece. So here's my rough draft that I showed you. And my topic is John Trudell. Something that I thought really, really matters is, so my title is John Trudell, political activist, poet, and music. His words really inspired people. He used nonviolent protest to make changes. So his words are really, really important. That's something that really, really matters. So I definitely knew that I needed a quote in there somewhere. What are some of John Trudell's powerful words that he used? So I wanted to make sure I put a quote in my piece of writing. Another thing that when I asked myself what really matters is in this section here, activism brought attention to issues. So his activism actually changed the world, and his activism actually affects us, you and me, and I'll show you how that plays out in our piece of writing. So those are two areas that I thought I definitely need some revision from my rough draft. So here's my draft. And then here I moved it into my revision process. So here's what I have so far. John Trudell, political activist, poet, musician. Here's my introduction that sets up the subject and gives the reader a preview of what is going to follow. Born on February 15, 1946, near the Santee Sioux Reservation in Nebraska, John Trudell learned to use words to inspire change. John Trudell became an important political activist that used his powerful voice to bring about positive change to the American Indian community. The subject of American Indian rights. Trudell was a political activist. He was the national spokesperson for the Indians of all tribes' occupation of Alcatraz. He was also chosen to be the national chairman for the American Indian movement from 1973 to 1979. My next subsection. Activism brought attention to issues. The American Indian movement, led by Trudell, brought worldwide attention to the plight of American Indians. This laid the groundwork for other movements, and his words still inspire us today. So here's the part where I thought, what really matters? Something that really matters about his political activism. I said it brought attention and laid the groundwork for other movements, and that affects you and I because, and this is where I added this section. Do you know, I wish I had an example, but unfortunately I don't have my whole classroom library here. But oftentimes in nonfiction, instead of just having straight text, they'll have, to make it a little bit more interesting or draw the reader's eyes to a different place in the text, to highlight it a little bit more, they'll have little text boxes, just additional information. So I included this little "did you know" text box right here. And I said, did you know that the occupation of Alcatraz inspired the Milwaukee chapter of AIM? On August 14th, 1971, protesters took over an abandoned Coast Guard station on Milwaukee's lakefront. The protesters were successful in retaining possession of the station Let me fix that. Which became home to the Indian Community School until 1980. Our Indian Community School was housed in that abandoned Coast Guard station for many years, and that movement was inspired by those protesters at the Alcatraz occupation. So that was something that was important, and I wanted to highlight that. Last but not least, my last section, Death and Legacy. Trudell died on December 8th, 2015, but the message of his powerful words still live on and inspire us today. And here, remember, I wanted to ask myself what is important, and I also said that his words are definitely important. So here's where I had to go back and I had to go do some additional research, and I looked for some quotes that were important from John Trudell. And this is one that I found. I wanted to take the power of thought and the word, along with the power of speaking and heart, and see if we could wire what was coming out of us as humans with electric instruments. So there's some of his own words on how powerful words can be. So that's where I ended my piece for now. But remember, writers are always revising. And even after this draft, I thought to myself, my title here, political activist, I definitely included information on that. But these two right here, poet and musician, I didn't really include information on him being a poet or a musician. So as I continue to revise and add and think about what is really important, what really matters in this piece of writing, I might go back and I think I'm going to put in another subtitle on being a poet, spoken word poet, which led to him also being a musician. So I'm going to continue working on my revisions. Remember that next, after you finish your revisions, you are going to be doing some editing and publishing. So you can see I used an editing technique that you saw that was just happened to work well for this video. As I read it out loud, that's where you can see some little mistakes that you have. So that's an editing technique that you are definitely going to want to use too. Whether you read it out loud just to yourself, or if you share it with somebody at home, read it out loud to them. That's where you can really hear, are my words flowing, or are there some errors that make me stumble as a reader? That's a good technique for the editing process. When you're publishing, you can again do that in your notebook. I prefer to do my drafting and my revising in my notebook, but when it comes to publishing, the publishing piece, I really like the tool of the Chromebook and the Google Docs to use for my publishing. So you can see how I published mine. A few techniques, I added an image, I can bold words, I can bold those subtitles. So you also want to think about how you are publishing your piece as well. Now, my next step too in the revision process, I have to remember that I got this information from someplace else. This isn't a picture that Mrs. Ash painted, so I have to give credit. So on my last page, I'm going to have to give some a bibliography of where I got this information and the sources that I used, sources cited, and where I got this image from, because that's definitely, I have to give Bunky Echo Hawk credit for his image here. So if you have any questions, remember this is due tomorrow. You should be working on your revising, your editing, and publishing. So you have today and tomorrow, and I hope